Hi, I'm an American, but I do know some things about not America. So today on Knowing Better, we're going international and discussing the history of the United Kingdom. Since the history of Britain is like 10 times longer than that of America, I'm gonna have to skate over some things. Mostly everything that happened before 1066. Just to set the scene for you, before the Romans showed up, the islands were inhabited by the Celts, who came to the islands between 500 and 400 BC. 800 years-ish later, the Angles came from the Jutland Peninsula in what we call Denmark today, as well as the Saxons from Saxony in northern Germany. The Angles are where the name... Look, I shouldn't have to spell everything out for you, right? Like, you should be able to figure it out. English, English... It's not that far of a jump. Anyway, the two together are what we call the Anglo-Saxons, and they're usually what we think of when we think of white English people. And they landed on the eastern half of Britannia, which would later become England, and around the same time the Britons from Brittany in France landed on the western half, which would later become Wales, and still strongly identifies as Celtic. There were some small kingdoms here and there, blah blah, that doesn't matter. What does matter is how many there were, which I'll get back to that, remind me. Anyway, our story begins when William the Conqueror, a Norman from Normandy in France, did the thing that he was named for. He conquered all of the kingdoms and created the Kingdom of England. Somewhat fun fact, he was the Duke of Normandy when he did this, so for a brief moment the King of England was a vassal of the King of France, but let's not overcomplicate this. But this is where our story begins. Map of the world, England. Side note, England and France are like the real Housewives of Europe. They hate each other, talk smack about each other, and even get in the occasional fight which can last up to 100 years. But if any outsider comes around looking to start something, they become BFFs so fast it'll make your head spin. England and France have a crazy complicated and intertangled history, but there's one thing that's always annoyed me, so let's clear that up now. How do you say this? If you said ye, you're wrong and you should backhand yourself in the face. The English didn't have the letter Y. All of the printing typesets were manufactured in France, which did have the letter Y. The th sound in Old English was represented by a letter known as thorn. The French typesets didn't have that letter, so the English just substituted this weird character that they had no other use for. So how do you pronounce this? The Old N. The letter was used everywhere, including in the King James Bible, as in, thou shalt not mispronounce the word ye any longer. There are other fun crossovers though. What's this animal called? Good job, it's a chicken. What's its meat called? This isn't a trick question, it's also chicken. That's how it should be. There's the animal, you kill it and eat it, and it's still that animal. But since the English and French invaded each other so many times, English is confused. What's this animal? Yeah, and its meat is called beef, which is a French word. Or this, pork, another French word. Or mutton. The list goes on. Anyway, sorry, you know how I get with tangents. Wales was brought into the picture pretty quickly. William the Conqueror established a frontier with several lordships surrounding the Principality of Wales. Wales didn't have a king, it had a prince, and it kind of still... I'm getting ahead of myself. That lasted around 500 years when Wales was officially brought into the fold in 1536. It was given everything equal to England. Membership in Parliament, lordships... Everything was equal, which is why England and Wales are like this, son. I mean, look at this map of the Brexit vote and tell me you can see a difference between England and Wales. Wales didn't really start their whole identity thing until the 1950s and 60s, when they started to think that their language and culture might die out, so they started to try and preserve it. The Welsh are still very much Celtic, and you can definitely see it in their language. This is a very common Welsh first name, Llwellyn. It's not that difficult to pronounce, and it's actually kind of cool, but then there's towns like this.
Just up the road from Llanfair Pwllgwyn, go get a Quindrobos, Llantysilio, go.
Come on, man, you can't... There's 4 L's in a row, you can't do that. Anyway, Wales didn't get its own parliament until 1998. So while people always say that Wales is its own country, come on. Under those same Acts of Union in 1536, the Prince of Wales became a title given to the heir apparent to the King or Queen of England. They have almost no power there and it's almost entirely symbolic, but still, even though they were more or less conquered by the King of England, Wales still has a prince, which if you watch Since you watch Game of Thrones, this should remind you of somewhere. Dorne. In fact, Westeros is very much modeled after the British Isles. Here's the British Isles, Great Britain and Ireland. And here's Westeros. Take Ireland, flip it around and enlarge it. Then take Great Britain, flip it.
Pop it. Twist it.
And there you go. Westeros. The similarities don't end there though, aside from the fact that there's a Prince of Wales and a Prince of Dorne. You already forgot to remind me, didn't you? Guess how many kingdoms there were in England before William the Conqueror came along? I'll give you a hint, it was called the Heptarchy. 7. There were 7 kingdoms. Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Wessex, Essex, Sussex, and Kent. But wait, there's more! In Westeros, the northern border of the 7 kingdoms is known as the Wall, and it separates the civilized realm from the wildlings and grumpkins and snarks. In the real world, it was called Hadrian's Wall, and it likewise separates the civilized realm from the wildlings, grumpkins, and snarks. Although while the wall looks like this, Hadrian's Wall looks like this. I'm pretty sure Wheatley could scale that wall, but hey, I'm not judging. It was built in 122 AD. I'm sure they did the best that they could. Hadrian's Wall isn't actually the border between England and Scotland, but it's pretty close. In some places it's only a half a mile off, and in others it's 60 or 70, but it's still pretty close, alright? So Scotland. How Scotland became part of the UK is complicated. James VI, King of Scotland, inherited the throne of England by being the second cousin of... Look, like Westeros, the lords and ladies and kings and queens all married each other, so they're all related to each other somehow. The family tree looks like an overly complicated web, and CGP Grey did his very best to explain it, link in the description. Anyway, so he became James I, King of England, while also being James VI, King of Scotland. They weren't united, so he was the king of 2 separate places and had 2 different numbers after his name. Scotland tried to start their own colonies in the New World, which didn't go so well, so they ended up in a lot of debt. England offered to forgive and assume that debt if they united, which they did, forming the Kingdom of Great Britain in 1707. So their flag went from looking like this to looking like this. Like Wales, it got its own parliament in 1998, but unlike Wales, Scotland has always been much more independent. And maybe again if the UK goes through with Brexit. Again, look at the Brexit map. It should be pretty obvious where Scotland is. But while we're looking at this map, see that bit in Northern Ireland? How did that get there? Ireland is its own country with its own crazy history and will likely get its own video at some point, just like some of the other countries I'll talk about, so forgive me if I skate over a few things for now. The Irish call their island this, which if you're like me, your first inclination is to pronounce it like
my life for ire.
But really their language is Celtic. Celtic refers to the family of languages which Irish and Welsh belong to, so they pronounce it like this.
Éire.
So that's kind of a buzzkill. Anyway, in 1542, the Kingdom of Ireland was established, and King Henry VIII of England was named the King of Ireland. Much like the situation with Scotland, he was king of both places, but not one united kingdom. That happened in 1800 when the kingdoms of England, Scotland, and Ireland were all combined to form the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland. Ireland is famously hyper-Catholic, while England is not. In 1920, they divided the island up into Northern and Southern Ireland, which was renamed the Irish Free State in 1922 when it broke away from the United Kingdom but remained part of the Commonwealth, thus renaming the UK to the United Kingdom of Great Britain and just Northern Ireland. Again, glossing over some things, in 1949, Ireland broke away from the Commonwealth and became its own independent republic. So what is this Commonwealth thing? You've heard me say it several times in this video and in previous videos. It's a much nicer, more modern term for the former British Empire. The first bits of the British Empire were on islands in the Caribbean, but more famously in North America. In 1607, Jamestown, Virginia was established and later became the colony of Virginia. Just to shatter the American myth that the first colonists were pilgrims fleeing religious persecution, no. The first colonists were here looking for profit. Shortly afterwards, though, several religious groups like the Pilgrims came to America and formed the colonies of Plymouth, Maryland, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. The English and the Dutch were in several fights with each other over establishing overseas territories. They butted heads quite a few times, but the first was in 1664, when the English captured New Netherlands and its main city, New Amsterdam, which if you ever watched Animaniacs, you should know how they renamed it.
Even old New York was once New Amsterdam. Why they changed it, I can't say. People just liked it better that way.
I should probably do a video on the rest of that song. It's actually a pretty interesting story. I wonder if it has anything to do with why Oklahoma has a panhandle. Anyway, that's enough about the 13 colonies. It's not like anyone lives there anyway, right? So further north in 1670, they established the Hudson's Bay Company in Rupert's Land. This is important because it, along with the 13 colonies, became a flashpoint between Britain and France during the 7 Years' War. When France lost, they gave up their colony of New France, which was made up of Quebec and Ontario. In 1867, most of the British territories in North America were united to form the Dominion of Canada, except Newfoundland, which was its own country until 1949 when it joined Canada. Even in World War II, there were Newfoundland regiments in the British Army. Anyway, since Quebec and Ontario used to be New France, that's why Canada's official languages are English and French. And why every once in a while Quebec toys around with the idea of independence. Canada didn't become a fully independent country until 1982, though it is still part of the Commonwealth with a queen as its head of state. In 1606, the Dutch found a new continent in the southern hemisphere and named it New Holland. A few years later, they found some islands to the east of it and named them New Zealand. Holland and Zeeland are both provinces in the Netherlands, so like the British, they didn't really venture too far outside of the box when it came to coming up with creative names for things. Anyway, in 1783, the British lost their penal colony in North America and decided to make up for it by establishing a new colony for prisoners somewhere else. So that very same year, they established the colony of New South Wales on the continent of New Holland, which they mistakenly renamed Australia.
Would you like to know more?
I made a video about that a while back. They also just sort of took New Zealand from the Dutch with little resistance. Australia is still part of the Commonwealth and, like Canada, became its own independent country in 1986, still recognizing the Queen as its head of state. New Zealand, on the other hand, is not fully independent, but is a self-governing dominion, still having the Queen as its head of state. But that wasn't the last time that those troublesome American colonies forced the British to look elsewhere. America was by far the largest exporter of cotton in the world, especially to Britain. In 1861, most of America's cotton-growing states went into rebellion, and the subsequent blockade stopped any American cotton from reaching Britain. So they were forced to look elsewhere, namely India and later Egypt, but India. The British already controlled a large portion of India under the East India Company, but that control greatly expanded once cotton happened. In 1876, the Queen of England was declared to be the Empress of India, and since slavery had been illegal in the British Empire since 1833, they just brutalized the Indians instead. Here's a throwback to your elementary school history class. What was the British colonial trade system where all raw goods were sent to England for manufacturing and then sold back to the colonies where they came from? Mercantilism. If you got that wrong, you have to hit the like button or something. I don't know. Saying that stuff usually works for other YouTubers, right? So all of that raw cotton was exported from India, manufactured in England, and then sent back to India as finished textiles, which is why Gandhi, during India's independence movement, said, "Machinery in the past has made us dependent on England. This is why we have made it the patriotic duty of every Indian to spin his own cotton and weave his own cloth." Gandhi's movement successfully got India its independence in 1947, along with Pakistan, and everything has been peaceful there ever since. Neither country has any tie to Britain, not even having the Queen as its head of state. They are as fully independent as the United States. So there you have it, a very, very brief history of how the United Kingdom came to be, and how losing America forced them to form the British Empire, at one point governing over a quarter of the world's population with territory on every continent. Sorry, world. Our bad. It worked out in the end though, right? So the next time someone tells you that Wales is its own country or that the sun never sets on the British Empire, hopefully now you know better. Oi mate, that was well wicked! Do you think that we'll ever see the likes of the British Empire again? Let me know down in the comments. And don't forget to colonize that subscribe button by clicking it. I know a lot of you have been asking about the return of psychology videos, and if you follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Reddit, you'll know what's coming up next, so do that.